Yeah, I agree with the thrust of your question that it's, life is sometimes unfair for presidents. And there's certain things today that I can point back to decisions that were made in the 1950s that help cause things that are positive or negative. You know, the nuclear reactors were developed in the 50s, but we also goaded OPEC into forming in the 1950s, and we live with both of those things today, positive and negative. But when you've been president for 8 years, I think it's pretty hard to not take responsibility for where things end up. So in that case, I think the voters are, it would be hard to expect anything else from the voters than to hold that accountable. Now, I do think that the Senate races may be even more interesting than the presidential races, because if the president is elected and doesn't have strong support in the Senate, where a filibuster can stop action, they can't get much done. And one of the reasons Reagan was so powerful as a president was when he was elected in 1980, a lot of new senators were swept in on his coattails, and that was one of the reasons that he was so powerful in the Congress, even though he had a Democratic Congress. So I think on election night, I'm also going to be watching a lot of those key Senate races as well as the presidential race.
Democrats will lose their margin? What do you mean?
No, they're going to gain.
They're going to gain a lot of seats.
They're going to gain, so...
They might have a veto-proof majority. I mean, that's sort of the 60s, the golden number if you're a Democrat, and then you're going to have Reid, Pelosi, and Obama is sort of the theory right now, with a fairly unified government that can pretty much enact its will.
Yeah, it's right now the Democratic majority in the Senate depends on Joe Lieberman's vote. So it's what you would call the narrowest of majorities. But right now, there's several states that have been pretty much guaranteed that the Democrats will pick up, like Virginia. And then there's a lot of states that are very close, and several with longtime incumbents that seem to be losing right now.
The Jimmy Carter Presidential Library, for those of us that haven't been there yet, give us a tease of what we're going to find when we visit.
Well, you know, like the Ford Museum, we have an exact replica of the Oval Office. So for people who've been there, that may not be such a draw. But we do have the Nobel Peace Prize, which is a terrific thing to actually see up close. We've got a great film on the Camp David peace process. That's my favorite thing in the whole museum. And we get, like all the presidents get great gifts from foreign leaders, and they're spectacular, and they don't get to keep them. So we have them all, and people can come down there and see them, and they'll learn a lot about the issues of the 70s are actually some of the same issues today. We actually have one of the solar cells that Carter put up on the White House roof, and we've got it on display there.
I remember reading in one of the national media political experts or pundits making the argument that Barack Obama has a lot in common with Jimmy Carter, or vice versa, in just their thoughts. Any agreement from you?
I don't see a lot of similarity. I mean, I think they both sort of started as underdogs, you know, against people that were favored. I think they are both probably internationalists. Carter didn't ever live abroad, but he had been in the Navy, and when he was in the Navy, he had spent time in China. He'd spent time, you know, traveling around the world. But I don't know. I think they're of somewhat different generations. I don't think they've had that much conversation. President Carter said that one of the driving forces in him supporting Obama was that all of his grandchildren were Obama, and they worked on him, and that was a powerful influence.
Of course, the comparison that's most frequently made is Obama and Kennedy, which holds some water and doesn't hold some water. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, Carter was a young president also, but I think the youth thing with Kennedy and Obama is striking. It's clear that Obama wanted to be viewed more in terms of the Kennedy prism than the Clinton or the Carter prism, and that's worked well for him. He is also a great articulator and orator, maybe along the lines of Kennedy, and that is not the only presidential skill that's needed, but it's an important one.
Only twice in American history have senators gone directly from the U.S. Senate to the presidency. It happened in 1921 with Warren Harding, and it happened in 1961 with Kennedy. That comparison also is interesting. Of course, both of those presidents died while in office in their first term.
Why has it been so difficult for a senator to get there?
Well, it's the legislative temperament versus the executive temperament. They always say, you know, if you have a voting record you're found compromising on all kinds of things that make it harder when you're trying to prove you have the executive temperament. You can make a tough decision and hold the line and be consistent and not flip-flop. That it's harder to make your case.
And we saw that in the debates with they're attacking each other's positions that were taken in
Exactly.
votes. So
this is the first time, also, by the way, in U.S. history when the two finalists for the presidency have been senators.
Yeah, I think, Gleaves and I both worked for governors, and I think we probably would agree that a person who's been an executive probably is going to organize a better campaign. They're going to probably have better instincts for how to run a government. So I think the voters in general, all things being equal, have been pretty wise to look to governors. But the governors didn't do as well this time.
No, they didn't. Briefly, Gleaves, I just have to pick your brain about John McCain's decision to leave Michigan.
Catastrophic. All of the news leading up to that decision was that Macomb County Democrats might be able to be roped in because of Sarah Palin and sort of the configuration of the Republican message. When John McCain decided to pull out of Michigan, he did so, you notice, the day after the Palin-Biden debate, so he stepped on his own potentially successful headline right there. So a PR disaster from that point of view. And what's he done now to Ohio voters, the Pennsylvania tea, of the bullet and bait crowd, and I mean, he said, I'm giving up, and I think it was disastrous for his campaign to do that, and reflects poorly on his judgment.
And premature.
Yes.
Gentlemen, thank you. We're out of time, but we appreciate you joining us. Dr. Jay Hakes from the Jimmy Carter Presidential Museum and Library, and Gleaves Whitney here from Grand Valley State's Hauenstein Center for Presidential Studies, our guests. I want to remind you that this Sunday night here on WGVU at 7 p.m., a live televised debate between the U.S. Senate candidates for Michigan, incumbent Democrat Carl Levin and his Republican challenger, State Representative Jack Hogendijk. I hope you'll join us for that here at 7 p.m. Sunday. Have a great weekend.